So we are in another week of our series, Listening to Jesus, but I have this question for you to start us out. Have you ever been in a situation or found yourself at a place in life and you've just asked the question, how did I get here? I think we've probably all been there at some point or another. And I remember this one moment. It was before I'd met my husband, but I was driving down the road and I'm contemplating life and where I am at in life and some of the things that have recently happened in my life, including, mainly pertaining to a bad relationship that I had just ended and ended very badly. And I'm just driving along the road, have the windows down, the radio's not on, but I just remember asking God, how did I get here? And I heard, she might think I'm crazy for this, but I heard, in my spirit, you put yourself here. It's not what I wanted to hear. So I'm like, God, no. What I mean is, why does this keep happening to me? And I hear, because you've allowed it. So I pull over. I'm ready to argue, right? I'm ready to give all the facts. No, God, I didn't want this to happen. Like, I didn't make him do this. Like, I didn't want any of this. But I hear, yeah, that's true. But you put yourself there. You allowed yourself to be in that. And it was like, they say hindsight's 20/20, but it was like a movie playing in my mind where God brought back into my mind all these moments where I knew I should do one thing, but I did the other. I knew I should not date, and yet I allowed a friend to talk me into dating. I knew I shouldn't date somebody who didn't share the same beliefs as me, and yet I did it anyway. There were all these moments all along where I should have broken up with this person, but then I didn't. I knew these things, but yet I did my own thing. And I realized as I sat there on the side of the road that God was right. I had put myself in that situation. I had allowed myself to be in a relationship or multiple relationships that I knew I shouldn't have been in. And so in that moment, when something really bad happened in that relationship that finally got me to realize I should not be in it, that this was not working, it was in that moment that it was as though God had turned the volume up so that it could get my attention. You see, when we refuse to allow for time of silence and solitude, when we refuse to get in his scripture and do the things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, when we refuse that, sometimes the only way for God to get your attention is to turn the volume up really loud. And it's not always things that we do, but there are moments and those seasons and situations in life that God gets your attention. And it's not things that he necessarily causes, but it is things that maybe he allows because he knows he can't get your attention any other way. And so God will use circumstances or situations in our lives to get your attention. He does this. He's done it for my life in that situation, and he does it for us as well. And in my life, it was relationships, but in your life, maybe it was an opportunity that you took for a job thinking it was really great only for it to fall through. Maybe it was buying a house or a car that you knew you really couldn't afford, but you really wanted it. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it's moving, picking up your whole family and moving, and you've done that only to regret it because you realized maybe that wasn't really what you were supposed to do. There are many moments in our lives that we might come to this place, and we have to realize that maybe we're the ones at fault. Maybe God is just trying to recapture our attention and our hearts in those moments. So we're going to look at a story in Luke chapter 15 that might be familiar to many of you, but maybe not to others. But we're going to look at it through this lens. And so in Luke chapter 15, we see Jesus is sharing a story, as he often does, but it's in response to the grumbling of the Pharisees as they have seen him hanging out and associating with tax collectors and sinners. And so Jesus, this is a third of the stories that he shares, and he says, to illustrate this point further in Luke chapter 15, verse 11, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." So his father agreed to this, to divide his wealth between his 2 sons. Now, this doesn't say that the younger son asked his dad, "Hey, Dad, I would really like to do this. I think I want to take my money and I want to move away and make something of myself. Do you think that that's a good idea?" No. He doesn't ask for any wisdom or advice from his dad. And while this might not be uncommon in our culture, we're used to kids getting a certain age and they move out, they go to college, they pursue their career, they move out of state often to do these things. And so it's not uncommon for us, and we might not see the real problem here. But for Jesus' culture in this day and age, this was highly unusual, because this would have brought shame and disrespect on the father and his household. Not just in words, because he's basically telling his dad, "Hey, I wish you were already dead so I could get this." But his father most likely divided the land that they had, the land that had been promised to them and gifted to his family and his house for generations. He divided that land, and the son most likely shared his portion, like sold his portion of it in order to get that money also. And so the father's lost land that is now no longer in their family. So there's a lot more at play here. But the son, even though he might know these things, he might understand some of this, he's not concerned about any of that. Instead, the son, we see, is only concerned about what he's doing, what he wants. And he's seeing that even though this might not be good, his mind's made up, right? The son's mind is already made up. And so the father, he doesn't try to fight him. He doesn't try to talk him out of it. We don't see any of that in this story. And it's most likely because the father knows there's nothing I can say to change his mind. And so as much as it might not be good for him, he allows it. And we do the same thing to God often. God knows what's best for us. He often shares about it in his word. If we sought him in silence and solitude, he could tell us what's best for us, but oftentimes we don't want to do it his way. God's way may be better, but we often choose to go our own way instead. It's what I did when I entered into that relationship with someone who literally told me, "I don't believe in God." I knew what God said about that. I knew what my counselors and youth leaders had told me and taught me about this, the wisdom they gave me when it came to relationships. And yet, I had my mind made up, and no one would have told me would have changed my mind. And so I can't help but think that the father in this situation, his heart is breaking because he knows this is probably not what's best for his son. But because his mind's made up, he allows it. And God often does the same in our lives. He knows what's best for you, but your mind's made up. So he allows it, as much as it might break his heart. Because we refuse to seek solitude and silence, often because our minds are already made up. We don't want to hear what God has to say. We don't want to hear what any of our Christian friends want to say, because we already have made it up in our minds that we're going to do it this way. So he goes on, in verse 13, it says, "A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings up, and he moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money on wild living. About the time that his money ran out, a famine swept over the land, and he began to starve." So he persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. So the young man, he became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. So you see, he is far away from home. He's in a foreign land. He's a foreigner at this point. He's gone through all his money, and a famine comes along. And he is tending to these pigs that he's begged this farmer to give him a job so that way hopefully he can make some money or get some food. And you have to understand, because we maybe don't get this because of our love of bacon, but for a Jew to have anything to do with pigs, for a Jew to not only be around pigs, but want to eat what they're eating, this was a different level of degradation for him. This was an all-time low, like his rock bottom point. Because even though he maybe had forgotten some of the things he was raised in, he knew this was not okay. He knew in that moment that what he had been doing was not working. Because I'm sure this is not what he set out to accomplish, right? The son really probably thought he was going to go and make something of himself. He probably didn't intend to spend his money on wild living. He probably didn't intend all those things. But nevertheless, he got to this place. And most of the time, when we find ourselves in those places, when we're like, how did I get here? Why is this happening? We didn't set out to get to that place. That was never in our mind or in our intention to end up in a place like that. But we get there all the same. And so within this, though, it says that he was starving. He began to starve. He was so hungry. And let me tell you something. There is something about physical hunger that gets our attention like nothing else does, right? My kids all the time will say they're starving when they're hungry. And I have to tell them, you don't know what starving really is. But there's something about it. God has wired us in such a way and made us to where we have certain physical needs. And when those don't get met, our brains, our bodies strive to get them met, not always in the best ways. But we know it gets our attention in a different way than other things might. And so in this, he is so hungry that in that, his attention is brought back to how things were before. His attention is brought back to the situation that he really has placed himself in. And so he goes on in verse 17. It says, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have enough food to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. In this moment, when he comes to his senses, it reminds me of when my husband takes off his noise-canceling headphones. Y'all know, you probably have some, like most of you all probably have the ones that go in your ears, and so people don't even know that you can't hear them. They're talking to you and having a conversation. This happens with me and Pastor Anna all the time. And they don't know you're talking to them. But so my husband, when he has those on, I know that I can't talk to him at a normal volume. I know I have to yell really loud or I have to do something to get his attention. And once I get his attention, he takes those off and it's like, oh, the world has come back in. But that's what I feel like in this moment is like happening. The volume's gotten really loud. It's got his attention. He's taken those off. And he realizes how dire his situation is. He realizes what is going on. But it's not just that he realizes what's going on. It's that he realizes his mistakes. The younger son, when he comes to his senses, he doesn't say that it's because his dad didn't give him enough money, so I'm going to go back and beg for more. He doesn't say, well, this famine had to come along and make it to where I didn't have food. He doesn't blame any of those things on the way that where he is at in his life. Instead of blaming on anything else, no, he realizes the choices I made were wrong. He says, I have to go to my father and confess. You see, often when we are in these situations that maybe we've allowed or put ourselves in, we want to blame other things. We want to blame other people. This is something I'm trying really hard to teach my kids to understand. Just yesterday while we were here for work day, Esme comes along and says, "Hey, Mom, I forgot to tell you, Carter pushed me down when we were cleaning in the toddler room." And Carter instantly says, "Yeah, but it's because you wouldn't do this, and I was trying to get you to do this." And I was like, "Hey, Carter, do you think that was the best way to get her to do that?" And he said, "Well, no, it was an accident." This blame game is something that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? It's easy to place blame on somebody else. It's a lot harder to take responsibility for our own actions. But in this, I want you to know, you can't blame God for it either. Often we want to, right? God, why? Why did you do this? Why did you let me move away only for this to happen? It's not his fault. If you'd have actually done what you should, maybe he'd have told you to do something different. Maybe the silence, you got tired of waiting and you just did it anyway. But here's another thing. It's not the enemy's fault either. So many times we want to blame it on the enemy, on Satan. And I want to tell you, you are giving far too much power to Satan that he doesn't have. Satan cannot control your actions. Satan doesn't make you do it. I tell my kids, you're in control of your body. Right? We're the ones who make those choices, nobody else. And so if you haven't done what you need to do to make the right choice, you can't blame anybody else, anything else other than yourself, and you have to take responsibility. But let me ask you, when you find yourself in that place, when you find yourself asking, how did I get here? What is going on? Why does this keep happening to me? Do you know what to do in that moment? Do you know who to turn to? Or do you sit there wallowing and placing blame on everybody else? Because the son, he knew where to turn to. He knew where to go in that situation. He knew that he could go back home. And even if he didn't feel worthy to be called a son anymore, he knew maybe at least I'd get mercy enough to be a servant. And so he returns home. And it says in verse 20, it says, so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son and embraced him and kissed him. And his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. I'm going to pause there, because I think so many times we don't turn our attention back to God because we don't feel worthy. And maybe you're not, because here's the truth, we're not. But God in his love and compassion wants you to turn to him. He wants you to turn your hearts and attention back to him. He is looking far off, waiting for you to turn back to him, because I want you to know, when you go your own way, he hasn't moved. It's you that have gone away from him. It's you that have chosen your own way, but he is right there waiting with arms wide open, waiting to embrace you with love and compassion and mercy. And so, yeah, maybe you've made some mistakes. Maybe you've messed up just like the son did. And it was never something that the father wanted for his son. And I don't believe God wanted you to have pain. He created this world to where you wouldn't, but we chose our own way. And so God, it's not his desire for you to do this, but in those moments, he will use it to bring you back to him, to bring you back on the right path. It says his father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring and put it on his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf that we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now is found. So the party began. When I had the really bad thing happen in my relationship, I didn't fully know where to go. but I knew that I'd always found safety and peace and love in church. So even though I didn't feel like I had anywhere else to go, that's where I knew I had to go, and I went to a church service that day. And I can't tell you anything that was preached, but I sat in the back crying. And I knew it was going to be okay. I didn't know how, but I knew it was going to be okay. And that night when I got home, when my boyfriend got home, he broke up with me. I knew I needed to end the relationship, but we lived together. There was a lot of complications that are not meant for before you're married, but I had put myself there, and I was not sure how to make this happen. And God, in his mercy and love and compassion, made it happen for me. I still had some consequences and some things to deal with afterwards that were not great. But God met me there. And that's where he often meets us. When you turn to him, he will meet you there in that place, in the middle of your mess, in the middle of your mistakes, in the middle of your bad choices. He's right there ready to meet you, right there ready to celebrate you coming back. Because that's what it is. He's always wanted your attention. And God wants your attention because he knows what's best for you. But often, even though he can use that to get our attention, it doesn't mean that that's his preferred method of speaking to you. But if we continue to place ourselves in these situations, that's what's going to happen. So God may not cause this to happen, but he allows it because he knows in our stubbornness, in our unwillingness to surrender, sometimes it's the only way. He did this over and over again with the Israelites throughout history. If you look throughout the Bible and read through it, this is what he does. They turn away, they go their own way, and God uses something to get their attention and bring their heart and attention back to him. So God will use things to get your attention, but it's so much better for you to just give it to him from the beginning. It's so much better for you to just give it to him from the beginning. See, some of you, you're in here, and maybe you've made a mess of things. You've made some mistakes. You know that you've not made the best choices, or maybe you're still dealing with the aftermath of some bad choices. God just wants you to give your heart and attention to him, to surrender those things over so that way he can bring you back to a place of life, just like the Son, to bring you back to a place of being found in him and in his arms rather than on your own. And so if you're in here today and that's you, I want you to know that over the next song, you can come forward. If you want to be by yourself, you can go along the sides and just kneel. I know we already had our prayer time, but don't let that stop you from taking this moment to just put your attention back on God. Give him your attention. Allow him time to speak to you where maybe you haven't before. Maybe you're in here and you've never given your heart over. You've never allowed him to give you this life that he can give you, this new life that can start now and last forever. If you've not done that, just invite God in. Surrender your life to him and watch him make things new again. But maybe you're in here and I want to talk to you, those of you who feel like, well, I've been faithful. I've been obedient. I've been doing the work. I've been serving him. I've been doing all these things. And you see some of these people who come in and they're getting these amazing testimonies from God. They're hearing from God. They're seeing life transformation. And you're like, but what about me? Well, the older brother felt like that in the story. The older brother had been serving his father, doing all the things. He stayed and was doing the stuff. And when he saw this happening, he was bitter about it. He felt resentment, saying, Father, I've done all this for you. You've never done this for me. And the father responds, he says, everything I have is yours. All you have to do is ask. Jesus lets them know, he's letting the Pharisees even know in this moment that there's love and compassion available for you too. All you have to do is ask. But sometimes we allow the work, the service to take place and take our attention more than the one we're serving. And so maybe you're in here today and that's you. Take time over this next song to turn your attention back to him. Wherever you find yourself, ask yourself, does God have my full attention? Does he have it in my marriage, in my finances, in my relationships, in what I purchase, in the jobs I'm going after, in the school that I'm pursuing? Does God have your full attention in all those things? If not, it's time to give it to him.